Can you guys hear me okay? I turned my levels down a little bit on this one, hoping that it would cut back on the amount that the microphone is picking up.
Did you get some lube, Dave?
I did not do that. David. We didn't lube the headset.
Always lube the headset.
The things we do to put up with podcasting.
Just submerge the entire headset in a tub of lube.
Exactly. Now, Shane, when we were talking about this the other day, was very snappy with me over chat because I said,
I don't think I was.
I said, I will go get some WD-40. And Shane said, well, that's not a lubricant.
That's not a lubricant.
And I was like, what have I been doing all my life?
What is it then?
It's a cleaner.
What? There's no way.
Yeah, it's like a lubricating cleaner. What WD-40 is actually like gets rid of moisture. Like it's like a corrosion inhibitor. Like it's good for like degreasing or like breaking like things, but I would not use it as a lubricant. I would use an actual lubricant for that.
So Google says WD-40, there's a question that says, what is it you mainly use for? It says protects metal from rust and corrosion, penetrates stuck parts, displaces moisture, and lubricates almost anything.
Yeah.
So I guess it's like multi-purpose.
It does the former much better than the latter.
Let me tell you what my purpose with it was. When I was a kid, we used to get a hold of a can of WD-40 and with the little plastic thing out the end, and then we would put a lighter in front of it and just have like a flamethrower coming off the end of the WD-40.
Does that work?
Yeah. Don't do that, kids.
Yeah, kids, if you're listening in your parents' car or something like that, or you're just big fans of the Dive Down, we are a family-friendly podcast besides Dave talking about makeshift flamethrowers.
I used to do that with spray cans of Axe. That's what we did.
I can't imagine the smell.
Are you an Axeman as well? Did you axe?
Used to be.
Stan is an Axeman.
Stan's still an
When I was in
Axeman?
high school.
Yeah, Stan.
He likes that chocolate one.
The chocolate axe sometimes.
Do you think Stan can get axe in the UK, or is he axeless over there?
I think they spell it differently in the UK.
A-Y-X-E?
Yeah, A-U-X-E.
Axe.
Hello and welcome to episode 247 of the Dive Down. Three away from an arbitrary number. 250 is coming up. We're not gonna. I don't know. Maybe we'll do something special. It doesn't. Devon O'Donnell, aka Doomwake, is 250. I feel like the hundreds are worth celebrating. I feel like 250 doesn't feel quite. It is half of 500, which is an immense amount. But that would mean that we're going to do this for another 250 episodes, which is daunting.
You know what we should do for 250? We should record a 250-minute episode.
Oh gosh.
So basically, like
a normal
basically
week.
2 episodes. Yeah, two. Yeah, like a normal.
An episode and a half, give or take.
I'll definitely clear that with the tower. Godfather Dave Harbarger, what do you think?
I think we're not gonna do much for 250. We did enough for 200. I can't believe that it's already almost been, they never thought we were going to make it this far. And here we are.
Yeah. Time flies.
Yeah.
The doubters, the haters.
The haters. Yeah.
The other Magic the Gathering podcasts.
They all hate us.
The people who own divedown.sucks, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. They are mean to us.
My friends, good to see you all. Or both of you, rather. I guess there's only 2. Is 2 an you all, do you think?
Yeah, for sure. It's you all.
Okay, good to see both
probably.
of you.
Technically, the way that WD-40 is technically a lubricant, but technically not very good at it.
Okay, my name's Shane here in Denver, Colorado, by the way. So before we get into the meat of this episode, let's talk about Heavy Play, that new-ish card gaming accessories brand. Improve your gameplay and your game day. By the way, all y'all out there, you have been using the code Randy over at Heavy Play. Even said, Randy goes to the Magic events, the larger events, like I think the SCG cons and things like that. And hopefully he'll be down in Atlanta for the Dream Hack if we go down to there. But either way, we'll see him sometime soon. But he says people are coming up to him saying, hey, we heard about you in the Dive Down. We wanted to see the stuff in real life, maybe before we bought it. So we know you're listening out there. Thanks for supporting Heavy Play and helping our relationship out. If you are not aware, playmats, deck boxes, card sleeves have enhanced ergonomics, mobility, and protection. The EquipMag system lets you magnetically attach your dice boxes, your deck boxes, your playmat, the ABCs, attach, bundle, carry.
Okay, so I gotta come clean. A couple weeks ago, I made it kind of sound like I came up with the ABCs when we were on the show.
That was spontaneous.
Randy said, "Thank you for calling out ABC. It was super intentional." So it turns out Randy is the good ad copy person, not me, just off the cuff referencing movies and having fun. Yes, Randy is a pro.
So this is potentially at your LGS. One of our Discord people said that they bought it at their LGS. So it's there at some of them. Or you can shop at heavyplay.com. And if you do, you can use code TheDiveDown2023 for 10% off of your first order there.
Yeah, and as Shane mentioned, Randy is traveling around going to some cons. We're hoping that he'll be at DreamHack, but he will definitely be at SCG Con in Pittsburgh from November 10th to November 12th, which is, about a week after the show comes out. And then he's also going to be at PAX Unplugged in Philadelphia, December 1st to December 3rd. So go say hi to Randy there. Tell him the Dive Down sent you if you are at those events and you want to check out his stuff.
Or Doomwake. Doomwake sent him.
Oh, yeah, Doomwake.
As well. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
So what are we doing on this show? It's our favorite time of year, spoiler season.
Yeah.
New cards yet again for us to imagine where they will be in decks and to be wrong 90% of the time. But the Lost Caverns of Ixalan, there's some cool stuff waiting for us in these caverns. We've got treasure, we've got equipment, we've got mana.
We've got caves in the caverns. There's caves.
Yeah, double caves. We'll find out.
Too many caves.
Yeah, there's a lot of caves. And we're also going to talk a little bit about Frank Karsten's most recent Metagame Mentor, or his top 15 modern decks for November 2023. Interesting article, a lot of cool numbers. And if you know, at least me, I like talking about numbers. But first, we have a little bit of housekeeping.
That's right. Thanks to new patron Stephen M. Thank you for joining the Dive Down to support us. And thank you to all the people going off in the Spotify comments still. We got tons of people. EJMD, Varg91, Issei, Tony P, a string of random numbers, John F, who washed his 4-color Omnath deck with Barrister and Man Soap. Don't do that, kids. Don't try that at home. Andrew E, Dr. Ali / the Oil Prince, who said he knows Doomwake, William, RMSED, and finally, now with Bacon. It's a lot of people.
Do you know the Oil Prince, Devon?
I do. Yeah, no, that's I think it's Dr. Snackbar in Twitch chat. So
yeah,
shout out to Snackbar if he's listening.
Yeah.
And if you want to be like Steven, you can join the Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown. You can support us at the store, thedivedown.com/store. And of course, Mana Traders, if you want to rent Magic Online cards using the finest rental service on the net, manatraders.com, use sign-up code THEDIVEDOWN23 for 10% off your first 2 months there. So Dave, you wanted to talk about this Metagame Mentor article. I mean, I do too.
I more saw that it existed and knew that you would want to talk about it, and maybe Devon would want to talk about it too. But mostly I knew that you would want to look at a table for a minute to get warmed up before we talk about cards.
Well, I mean, this is, I think, a very revealing table.
My favorite kind.
Yeah, like it's a glass table. You can see through it. It's like one of those Noguchi tables.
This is consistently what I say when I send a spreadsheet to someone in my work life. I go, I think you'll find this spreadsheet to be very revealing. I hope that we've done the data merge. We've pivoted, and now we can have revealed things.
Well, this revealing table, its data set is over 1,300 deck lists across the 4 Secret Lair Showdown qualifiers, the Modern 20K and ReCQ at MXP Portland, the Grand Open qualifier at the Legacy Series Sofia, the Modern 10K, 10K Trial, and ReCQ at SCG Dallas. And that's a lot of decks. That's a lot of matches. And
Frank fixed the mislabeled archetypes.
Thank you, Frank.
Blessings upon him and his family.
Doing God's work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they hired Frank to do these articles makes me so happy. Because before it was sort of like, we get some random Frank nuggets, and now we just have a steady source of Frank nuggets, much like McDonald's drive-thru.
They only come back once a year, though, at McDonald's, the Frank nuggets. Yeah, you don't get them.
You get the Frank nuggets with that Grimace shake?
They're on an opposite schedule to McRibs. A lot of people don't realize.
It's seasonal. It's only in France. You get the McDonald's pizza and the Frank nuggets. So we have a list of 15 decks. We have their percentage of the field, their win rate versus the field. And then because Scam is so maligned in the community right now, there's a special column called Record versus Rakdos. And you might not be surprised. Let's run down the field percentage.
I will say, the record versus Rakdos does make me feel a little bit like the wizard doth protest too much a little bit at this point, where it's like, okay, guys, the numbers are here. Let's see if it changes anybody's mind.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's revealing. And this is the kind of transparency. I mean, this is really from WotC. This is on Magic's website. So Frank is sort of just the data and mouthpiece of this information. So I'm glad that they're sharing it. So percentage of field. You might not be surprised, Rakdos Scam 18.5%, and its win rate versus the field is a very normal 52.6.
Do we know if that number includes mirror matches? I'm assuming it doesn't, right? Versus the field.
I would assume that Frank had took that out. I did not look into the article at this point, but
it's on the sentence after where I mentioned fixing mislabeled archetypes. It says, after fixing mislabeled archetypes, I determined the raw metagame share and the match win rates, non-mirror, non-buy, non-draw of every archetype, both against the overall field and against Rakdos Evoke specifically. So he has controlled for that.
Perfect. So yeah, not too amazing, very modern, normal. And I'm going to go just kind of speed through these a little bit. We've got Rhinos at like 7% with a 51% win rate. 4-color Omnath, I'm imagining that includes the bean stuff, 6.1% of the field with a 53.8. Not bad, not astounding. Yawgmoth at 6% with a 51.4%. And Is It Murktide, let's just round out the top 5 here, at 5.4% with a 47.7 Murktide win rate. Anything surprise you all here in this top 5? The silence is deafening.
I mean, I guess I would say I'm actually kind of a little surprised that Evoke's win rate is only 52.6%. Like looking at the rest of these numbers in terms of the matchup versus Rakdos, like there is some really low ones. Like there's a 43, a 45, a 47, other is 39. So I would imagine that number would be a little bit higher, but I guess not.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think some of the ones that have good representation, I mean, we jump into the record versus Rakdos here, but in these top 5 alone, Rhinos has a 55% against Rakdos. It has 4-color Omnath has a 52%, and Murktide as well has 52%. So just in the, about 18% of the meta alone, there is some 50+% right there. So that's not bad. Yawgmoth at 43 is, just to spoil it, Yawgmoth at 43 is the worst performing deck against Rakdos in the entire chart, besides way down, like a Bring to Light thing.
Yeah, however, it's worth noting that there are 15 decks on this chart, like we said. We've just listed out the top 5, so that includes Rakdos. 3 of them have positive win rates against it. Like Devon said, if you look down the chart, every other deck with 2 exceptions has a losing record against Rakdos. So it's a little more than just there's low numbers here. It's every single other deck, except for 2, which have very, very good records against Rakdos, have sub 50 against Rakdos.
I mean, but since we're talking about the record versus Rakdos, let's just get that off the table here. What's interesting to me is that the worst is 43 at Yawg, which is not out of bounds for like what you would consider a polarized matchup in Modern. Do you know what I mean? It's not like it's 43% against everything, or Rakdos is winning 57% of the time against everything. Besides that, everything's like 45% at worst, and many are above 50, like we talked about Omnath, Murktide, and then Rhinos at 55. We'll talk about the interesting 2 other outliers in a second, but this is not a ridiculous spread for what is considered like, the most busted S-tier deck in the format. And I think that says something about, perhaps that's one piece of data about why they might not have wanted to ban anything or make any changes to the format, because overall, not only for Scam, but for all of these decks, the win rates versus the field are like 45% to like 54%. That is a really good matchup percentage spread, I think, or win rate percentage spread, when you're talking about a format as interesting and as powerful as Modern. Like, that's Pioneer-esque.
Yeah, for sure. No, it, like you said, it definitely does make a lot of sense with that stuff. Just kind of looking through these numbers. Yeah, I mean, it definitely does kind of seem like a coin flip here.
Yeah,
doesn't seem too bad.
However,
However,
people are still not enjoying it that much, right? I mean, but maybe it's just easy to talk about. I don't know. It's Twitter. The prevailing mood still seems to be like, we hate Rakdos. We don't want to play against it. And then of course there were the memes floating around today with that, like the first 7 decks in the challenge on October 29th were Rakdos. It was like 1 through 7th place. So it's very weird. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, that challenge was 6 in the top 8 and 13 in the top 32.
Yeah.
The other challenges weren't too bad. I think it was 11 in the top 32, and then one had 7. So, I mean, the other two were a little bit more reasonable. But yeah, 13 out of 32. We haven't seen numbers like that in a while.
Yeah, and I think it really does get back to kind of what you were saying, Doom, which is that, or I think partially what you were saying, which is just that there's a lot of decks that Rakdos has a slightly weighted coin flip against, and then some that it doesn't. And there doesn't appear to be any particularly great way to target the deck. Besides, we have seen people been starting to do kind of what you've been doing. And I immediately was like, after our episode last week, I was kind of like, I'm just going to start playing with like 2 main deck Shieldred, like in my scam. And other people had the same idea, I think, having seen Shieldred sort of be so good in the mirror in the first place, like in the sideboard, why not play 1 or 2 main deck? And I've seen a bunch of lists that are running Shieldred main, taking out like a Blood Moon or something like that, and freeing up a sideboard slot for something else, and just having that powerful Shieldred main doesn't seem like it's a bad thing right now.
Yeah, Shieldred is definitely one hell of a card. I think a lot of people's kind of obviously the biggest gripe that people have with the Evoke deck, excuse me, is obviously the turn 1 scam draws, and you can. I think the issue for me is that, like, no matter how many cards that you sideboard targeting that specific turn 1 scam draw, it's like they can also they just have the ability to play a normal game of Magic. And I think that's kind of why these win rates are the way they are, is it doesn't have the scam opening a lot of the time, and when it doesn't have the scam opening, it does kind of feel like 2017 Jund, where it's just a coin flip against everything. It's like in that Ragavan into Dothy into Fable draws, like those, you're going to have some good games involving those. So I think that's maybe part of why, if that percentage of turn 1 grief was a little bit higher, maybe these numbers would be a little bit different.
Yeah. But let's talk about the 2 shining interesting lights that there are in here.
What do you got for me, Dave?
Well, there were 2 decks that stood out, I think, to a lot of people. One for its overall win rate versus the field, and the other one because of its sort of surprising record versus Rakdos itself. Small sample size on that one. Hardened Scales at 10th place in the overall meta share with 3.9%, but 58.6% win rate versus the field. Wow. And a 49-23 record against Rakdos for a 68% win rate here. That is wild.
That's impressive,
right?
Yeah,
that's quite good.
I think a lot of that is this Hardened Scales deck. I don't know how much experience you guys have playing against it, but it is really, really hard to play against. Like, there's so many things that you kind of have to think about in terms of like, how much damage am I taking next turn? If they have Arcbound Ravager, if they have a Hardened Scales, if they have a second Hardened Scales, what happens if they have this? And there's just so many different things that you have to think about. And that's part of it for sure, is that people just maybe don't have as much experience playing against that deck. Yeah.
I mean, it's a good deck. We talked about it about 3 or 4 weeks ago when I was like, I'm looking for a break. I want to try a new deck. And then I was like, I'm going to play Scales for fun. And it was fun. I mean, it's weird and challenging and difficult for sure, but I enjoyed it. And it's cool to see that it's, other people are picking it up, and also that it is actually pretty good right now. I mean, I can't tell you how many Twitter threads I see people where it's like, first person complains about Scales, second person complains about Scam, second person says, yeah, Scam sucks, the third person goes, just play Hardened Scales. It's like every single one now. So it's like we are entering the, what do they call it? It's actually a tempo format phase of Modern right now, or something like, that whole progression. Format. Yeah. Where it's like, oh, it's a bomby format. It's a too fast format. No, it's a tempo format when we're talking about limited. So I don't know where we are in the progression right now. I do think that people who are upset right now should just keep in mind, like, if we follow the logic of the way that we got a ban announcement 2 weeks ago, or the one that was like, we're not going to make any changes, we do have another window coming up on us extremely imminently with the release of Lost Caverns of Ixalan. I think if they still follow the logic of what they told us earlier this year, which was we're going to use time at the end of after each set comes out to potentially announce bans if we need to. So this discussion isn't over by a long shot. I do think these numbers certainly shade things a certain direction, but we'll see.
Yeah, people in my chat were definitely saying, I believe it was December 14th, I think is the window for the next ban announcements. So, keep that in mind. And I believe, I'm not mistaken, but I think that might be after the RCQ season is over, but I'm not 100% positive.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to turn this lovely chart and article by Frank into another ban or don't ban discussion. But I mean, when you look at these win rates versus the field and the win record versus Rakdos, it's like, what argument do you have besides prevalence? And that's the thing, is just like, what do you do to attack it besides people actually changing the decks that they're bringing to these tournaments?
Yeah, I mean, the other argument that you have is, we kind of posited that it's a three-legged stool last time. It was win rate, prevalence, and fun. And so, the stool has one wonky leg, and that wonky leg is fun. And so they might, it might happen. But I still don't understand why we're getting so many. I mean, people like playing the deck, I guess, but the challenges that are just stuffed to the gills with Rakdos is still fascinating to me. I don't know why that is happening quite so much. Maybe it's because the deck is better than the overall win rate. Like, is this going to be, we're going to have the phase that's like, well, it's actually just really good in the hands of pros, or it's really good in the hands of grinders, which, a couple of months ago it was, well, it's really good for people who don't know how to play, kind of like stories. So I don't know.
Well, we didn't actually talk about the other deck that has a strong matchup against Scam.
Well, who cares about this deck?
Well, oh yeah, none of us. Mono black coffers. Who plays this?
Mono black tempo.
Mono black mid range.
So Mono Black not only has a 52.3% win rate against the field, a meager 0.3 less than Scam. It has a 58%, although the sample size is only 24 matches, 58% matchup against Scam. But Devon, I think that you have said that the matchup has felt like a natural good one for you when you're on coffers, right?
Yeah, especially in the post-board games, because, so I mentioned earlier how there's not a lot of sideboard cards that are good against Scam, because if you plan too hard for the Scam aspect, you kind of just get buried by, their normal mid-range draw. But when you're playing a deck with Fatal Push and Thoughtseize, and you open on Leyline and follow that up with Fatal Push and Thoughtseize, that is the recipe for beating them. It's not just Leyline and nothing else. You need Leyline plus early interaction for their 1 and 2 drops.
Mm-hmm. And a bunch of main deck Shielder doesn't hurt too.
No, best card in the format.
Apparently, I ordered my second one, by the way. So I'm slowly building up my collection.
Ooh, you know what? Now I'm wondering if we look at this table, which one of these decks can we add Shieldred to the next?
Amulet Titan.
Yogg.
Here you go.
I don't know.
That's the stream tomorrow.
Hardened Scales with Shieldred. Just go for it.
Maybe if we had Mox Opal.
Yeah.
I wanted to call out a few more interesting performers. Burn at 4.7% at 45.2% win rate. Don't play Burn.
Stop that.
It's true. Just don't play it. We got Living End at 52.4%. Domain Zoo at a surprising 53.4% win rate. I don't think the sample size is huge here at 2% of the meta, but it's doing just fine for itself out there as well. So yeah, I mean, basically play whatever you want. And if you're going to go to a tournament, make sure you have something to plan against Rakdos. But I'm not unhappy with this data. I think this is the kind of data I want to see, meaning in terms of not only the data itself, but I think the numbers seem very safe to me. The numbers seem kind of like a format that is mathematically and matchup wise, at least, the kind of stuff that I'm fine playing in. Do I really want to keep seeing 18 to 20% of the field be Scam, especially in the challenges? I don't know, but that's for the community to sort out, in my opinion, not necessarily WotC, but we'll see.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I kind of agree with your sentiments where it's, if you're kind of ignoring the percentage of field, just looking at the matchups and overall matchup spread, I think this looks pretty good. There's definitely a few decks here that have, like we talked about, a positive win rate versus Rakdos, but yeah, time will tell. We'll see what happens maybe in December, or maybe it'll be after that, but we got to let it play out,
Yeah, definitely at this point, we're kind of in it for at least the next 6 weeks. And,
But we have so many new cards entering the format.
So many.
That might just make Scam the worst deck in the format, but not yet.
I don't think that'll happen, but you never know.
About that one.
There's been weirder things that have happened, I guess, but I don't think it's these cards.
Dave, you did a bunch of work doing like the initial selection. Thank you very much. There's some cards that I did add later on. I don't know if you saw.
I did not get a chance to look in again.
Oh man, they're so spicy. But did you have any thoughts you want to say before we get into this list?
I mean, I don't have a ton of thoughts. We covered all the mechanics last week, and I don't think there was anything new that came out of, any other coverage or spoilers that happened after we did the show last week. So I think that one thing I did was I did go through the spoilers and try to put them into loose thematic groups so that we can kind of just talk about things from a high level. There are several different categories here. There's kind of just cards that might be good on their own that seem to be just kind of like pieces of something. That's the largest group that we have to talk about. There's also, of course, there's Merfolk. So we'll talk about Merfolk at some point in time and kind of try to figure out where some of these cards might possibly go. There are some boats. There are some combo pieces. And that's kind of it for the moment. So that's the 4 buckets that we're going to be looking at. Good cards, combo cards, Merfolk, and boats, because I thought it was funny that they went together like that. But there are some weird things going on with this set. It does seem to be a little bit more of a lands matter kind of set than I was expecting, especially their caves archetype that they've added. Of course, Ixalan is always about like flipping permanents into lands or flipping lands back into permanents, which is kind of an interesting thing. I haven't seen anything that super impressed me on caves yet, though I'm starting to wonder if there might be something that happens there.
Yeah, there's some surprising number of cards to me that like put lands in play or have like not quite landfall triggers, but like ways of like ramping or getting lands out of your deck. And so whenever that stuff is in a set, you always have to sort of keep your eye on, how much is this ramping? Is this a new way of, new value for the mana that maybe isn't in Pioneer already or even in Modern? So that's the kind of stuff that, I'm keeping my eye on. There's even like some semi-aggressive cards that, are doing like treasure type stuff, and we know the power of treasures. So I'm interested in some of these themes for sure.
Yeah. Devon, any big picture thoughts before we hop into individual cards?
I mean, as far as big picture is concerned, I am, from the cards that I've seen so far, I'm a really, really big fan of this set with regards to Pioneer, which is kind of my main focus moving, as we get closer to Atlanta. And I think there's a couple of players here, but I'm really excited. This set looks awesome.
All right. So let's do it. So the first card I think we have to talk about in this set is got a great phrase. I kind of wonder why we didn't preview this card given the name of the card that we previewed the last time, which was Out of the Way. This card is called Get Lost. And it is
all right, I'm out.
A generic and a white for an instant that says destroy target creature, enchantment, or planeswalker. Its controller creates 2 map tokens. Their artifacts, blah, 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 blah. We know what map tokens do now. The only thing I want to mention that I don't think we said on the show last time is that map tokens have to be activated as a sorcery to do the Explore. I don't think we mentioned that. My bad. So this card...
Oh, wow. That's much worse than I thought.
It's way worse. It's way, way worse. So obviously the card that everybody compares this to is Fateful Absence, which creates a clue token and can target creatures and planeswalkers at instant speed for the same mana cost. So that's our baseline. People don't really like playing Fateful Absence. It's not a super popular card to play. It certainly comes up in certain sideboards and occasionally other decks in Pioneer specifically. How do we think this card compares to that card? And do we think that this is, where do we think this fits in?
I actually think this card's kind of cracked.
Okay.
This card seems great.
So,
because Explore is so much worse than Clue, do you think?
It is. Well, so here's the thing. We haven't really seen, as far as like the deck list that I've been looking at, I haven't seen a ton of Fateful Absences in the Pioneer blue-white control decks. Mm-hmm. But yes, this card, like giving your opponent 2 maps, I think is a lot better for you than giving them a clue, because 1, as we said, it's sorcery speed, so they can't like hold up mana and still end of turn pop. And 2, there's no guarantee they even have a creature in play, especially when you're playing a deck that is Supreme Verdict.
Right. Exactly.
So if you can clear their board after you give them maps, and on top of all of that, it kills enchantments, which can kill Leyline Binding, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, just to name a couple of, popular ones in Pioneer. Enigmatic Incarnation.
Mm-hmm.
I think this card is just crazy for blue-white control.
Yeah. So blue-white control, like the possibilities for blue-white control in Pioneer right now, they don't have the same advantage generally that blue-white control-ish based decks or decks that lean in heavy into blue-white and Modern do, where they get to really make sure that leyline binding is going to work, right? But they still run leyline binding sometimes, right? Or not much.
Sometimes. Not most of the leyline binding decks are just the enigmatic ones that just play like a pile of triumphs, because that's the only way that you can really support it is if you play like 12 triumphs.
Got it. Okay. So this is really like the new class of the 2-mana removal for blue-white, probably.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think so. Love it.
Yeah, I have nothing else to add. Those are my thoughts. What Devon said, it just hits enchantments. It's flexible. It's instant speed. I think the drawback is not really a drawback most of the time. And even if it is, it's like they have to work with what's already on their board, right? And I know this is like absurd to say because it's like, well, it could be a boat, like the next card off the top, right? But it's dealing with the known versus the unknown is still a big deal, right? So you give your opponent another unknown draw, it could be a much better card. You're just dealing with like some piddly creature on the board, and you're like, I don't really care if they even explore with this thing.
Yeah, and like they don't get to draw the card with Explore even. They just get to see if they want the card. Like that's really it. Or put it in their graveyard. Do you think other decks pick this up, Devon? Like, can this be played in a, let's say, I'm just talking off the top of my head here, like probably not like mono white humans, right? Like who might want to have an all-purpose removal spell like this. This probably can't fit in the same way because it doesn't have a supplementary suite of creature removal that makes the counters, if they go on things, matter less.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot of the white decks right now, they play Destroy Evil, which is a card that can kill Shieldred or enchantments.
Mm-hmm.
And this is similar to that, but it can also go after planeswalkers. Now, that being said, there's not really a ton of planeswalkers in Pioneer at the moment, with the exception of green, of course. Like, really no other decks play a suite of planeswalkers, so maybe, but as far as a sideboard card is concerned, I think you're probably better off playing Destroy Evil.
So we really think this is control. This is a control deck card, probably, and that's kind of it for now.
Yeah, okay. Pretty much. That's where I think it's going to be.
Okay. All right. Well, makes sense to me. I kind of came into this discussion thinking this card was a little mid, but now I can kind of see the error of my ways and see how it's so much better than Fateful Absence for sure.
One last note on Get Lost. Like, imagine, so in the scenario where your opponent is getting 2 cards off the map tokens, they're drawing 2 lands, right? Because they map, hit a land, map, hit a land. And most of the time, you'd rather just have them drawing 2 lands than a random card.
Yeah. Totally true, especially once you've established control with a Supreme Verdict or a bunch of counter spells or something like that. It's like, go ahead, draw blanks. I don't care. Yeah. All right, let's talk about another removal spell before we get out of this mindset. I'm going to move a little bit down the list. I would think we should talk about Molten Collapse, which is a red and a black for a sorcery that says choose one. If you descended this turn, you may choose both instead. Mode 1, destroy target creature or planeswalker. Mode 2, destroy target creature non-land, or destroy target non-land, non-creature permanent with mana value 1 or less. This card has had some wild conversations about it today on Twitter. People wondering if this goes immediately into Scam in Modern, for example, or if this really is just something that makes Rakdos midrange just a little bit better in Pioneer and also means that you can play the deck a little more faithfully on Arena as well, since Dreadboard doesn't exist on Arena.
Because we didn't have Dreadboard. That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Still don't have Dreadboard.
Yeah, well, now we know why.
Insane.
This has been on the roadmap for a while.
Yeah, they knew it was coming.
Yeah.
One thing that I like to do with Rakdos Midrange and Pioneer is just boot up MTG Goldfish and go find Misplaced Ginger's latest list. And looking at Ginger's latest list, there are 0 copies of Dreadboard. Okay. So it looks like that card is mostly fallen out of favor in Pioneer. But yeah, if you wanted a copy of Dreadboard, this is certainly a massive upgrade. One thing that's really nice about it too is it kills Witch's Oven, and the sack versus mid matchup, it's usually favors sack specifically because of Oven, and that could be pretty big.
Yeah.
Like, what else are we hitting here, really? Like, it's easy to kind of overlook the non-creature permanent with mana value 1 or less, but like, what else with mana value 1 or less are we really worried about in a format like Pioneer? Like you said, Witch's Oven. I can't imagine too many things, but that Rakdos is really concerned with. But you tell me.
So out of mono green, you can hit their sideboard Needle. When you're on the play against Convoke, you can actually hit their turn 1. Like if they have Inspector or Epicure, you can hit their artifact before they Gleeful.
Yeah.
That could be massive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That could definitely come up. Human sometimes plays Portable Hole. I'm trying to think. I'm just going through all the top decks. That's pretty much it. Spirits has the Curious Obsession that could come up, but there's not a ton. You're right. It's not a ton.
So there's some added value, but it's not like blowing anyone's mind, especially when Dreadbore is not really blowing anyone's mind, especially in like a more powerful format like Modern. Like this is just not an option. Like the instant speed of Terminate is what makes Terminate playable. Like you have to be able to take out like a Titan or something like that, or before it can attack or do something bonkers.
Yeah, I don't hate the idea of saying, hey, we're gonna have a 2-for-1. Right? This is a card that's a neat package. It's a 2-for-1. And if I set it up right perfectly, I can do something like I saw people talking about losing one of their Merfolk and losing their Aether Vial, for example, in a single exchange, something like that. But I got to say, there's already a card that occasionally is a flex spot in Rakdos Scam that does that. And that card is Kolaghan's command
variety.
Yeah, it's of the command variety. And the reason that I think that, at least in Scam, it's not going to end up filling in that hole is that with Scam, you also get to use that to get one of your cards back or make your opponent discard a card as well, in case you forgot what the other two modes are. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot better. I know it's more expensive, but I don't know. Like, I don't think this is a bad card. I just think that this is a better Dreadbore for decks that want Dreadbore, and Dreadbore is not a modern power level card unless you're playing like Niv to Light or something like that. Remember it used to be in that deck.
Yeah, one of the matchups that makes the most sense to me for this card in Modern is Hammer Time, but you can't afford to have a sorcery removal spell against Hammer Time because you just get destroyed by Inkmoth Nexus. So yeah, I don't know. I don't see it in Modern, but I could see like maybe Fringe Cyberplay and Pioneer, specifically out of like the mid deck against Sack for oven purposes.
Yeah, I will say one thing that's really interesting about this set that I don't know if anybody's talked about or like nothing has come across as cracked right yet is there is a lot of single mana equipment in this set. I think there's 4 or 5 different pieces of single mana equipment. So that might be something that's useful for Standard in that sense if there's an equipment deck that becomes big and you need to be able to kill their whatever. But we'll see. Like if the lens expands on the number of things that start getting run in Pioneer, if that single mana variety, then maybe this starts to come up a little bit more. But I don't know. I really, really want to like this card because I like playing red black. But I don't think this is it.
Yeah.
It's not changing anything, I guess is what I would say.
Can we talk about another card that I think is actually potentially top tier for at least Pioneer that you didn't have on the list at all, Dave?
Mm-hmm.
And that is Inti, Seneschal of the Sun. So Inti is 1 in a red, a legendary human knight, 2/2, reads, whenever you attack, you may discard a card, When you do, put a 1/1 counter on target attacking creature against trample until end of turn. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, exile the top card of your library. You may play it until your next end step. Okay, I think it's important to say that if you are discarding with Inti's ability, your next end step is literally the end step of that turn. It's not until your next end step. But if you happen to have maybe some kind of like instant speed madness effect or something like that, then you would have it like through your next turn. Like if you were discarding on your opponent's turn or something like that, right? So I think Inti is good-ish, but I'm not sure how good because this is a very synergy-driven card. Right. But maybe not super synergy driven. Like it's potentially just a somewhat aggressive enough. It kind of needs haste. It kind of needs to maybe impact the board a little bit more, but like it can buff a 1-drop immediately if that 1-drop has an attacking window that it can do, or it can feed into some kind of like discard or graveyard strategy. And like you sort of get the card back if you have the mana to spend on that card on your turn, or if it's like a land, you just get to play it. Lands are always really good to get off the top of your deck. If you're playing an aggressive creature deck, like if you're like some 19 or 20 land deck and you're throwing away 1 land that you don't really need and you're getting another land off the top, like it really makes your deck feel a little bit leaner. And I think there's a lot of value there. But I don't know how much value Inti is really offering. I just think it's doing some cool stuff. and supporting some interesting ideas.
For sure. When I saw this card, two things immediately came to mind. The first one was the first line of text where you can discard a card to put a counter on an attacking creature, and it gives trample. That with Hardened Scales, because I've been working on kind of a red-green Hardened Scales deck in Pioneer, and the synergy there is you have Voldaren Thrill Seeker, which is the backup thing that lets you fling stuff, so you can like make a big thing with Scales and then fling. That could be good in that deck. And then the second line of text, whenever you discard one or more, exile the top card you may play until your next end step, works very well with Pia. So if you play this, play a Pia, attack with this, discard a card, hit a land, play the land, get a 1/1. So those are kind of the two places that I see maybe this card being good. I think it's pretty sick. The only issue I have with it in Pioneer specifically is it doesn't pass the Bone Crusher test. So that's a little sketchy for me.
Yeah, I mean, if it gets one attack in, it can, right? But that's still asking a good amount.
Yeah, that's true.
That's still asking a decent amount.
Yeah, and it doesn't do anything when it comes into play. It's not like discard a card when it comes into play or when it attacks or something like that, which would even start the old ball rolling a little bit earlier.
Yeah, it feels like a little tuned that way, where it's like, this has to stay on the board for a minute. Like, you're not going to get an ETB that does the same kind of support. So I wish it did. That would feel quite good. That would feel like a real big enabler. This sort of feels like an enabler that it exists and it does something, but it's not like, I don't know if it's a card you can build around, but I think it's part of like an overall strategy, like you said, Devon. But maybe it is. Like, maybe in something like Pia, like this is just the missing piece that was needed to push it into like a real player. The Scales idea is really neat because of the counter synergy, of course. So
I mean, my impression of this card was I like all the text of it. I don't know where it goes in Pioneer because it's clearly not strong enough for Modern. And then Devon mentioning Pia made me go, oh yeah, well there actually is a red aggressive deck that might want this card and loves impulse effects like this. So maybe that is just a good home for that. Just a reminder to me that I need to be playing some Pia in that seems like my kind of deck.
They've actually evolved a little bit. They're more like Naya focused with Questing Druid. I think you'd like that deck.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that sounds sweet. Devon, do you want to pick the next card maybe from this first bucket that you want to talk about?
Oh, I'm glad that you asked, Dave, because I would love to talk about the Ancient One.
The Ancient One.
I know this is Shane's favorite archetype, but we'll get to that in a second. The Ancient One is blue-black, legendary creature, Spirit God. It is an 8/8. That's right. You heard me correctly. 2 mana 8/8. It has Descent 8. This card cannot attack or block if you have less than 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard. So you have to get to 8.
Less than 8 or more. That's a really weird way to phrase that.
Yeah, I think it was a translation, and I copied the translation, and it might have got copied over wrong.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of a weird way to. When I read that, I was like, wait, what? And then 2 blue-black, draw a card, discard a card. When you do, target player mills equal to that card's mana value. So 2 mana 8/8. That is a little hard to attack or block with, but the card that I want to pair this with, we don't need to attack or block with it at all. So people may remember this card called Fight Rigging, which is a 3 mana enchantment. Yeah, Shane definitely knows. 3 mana enchantment, Hideaway 5, which is ETB, look at the top 5, exile 1 face down. Rest go on the bottom, and then beginning of combat, you can put a counter on target creature you control. Then, if you control a creature with power 7 or greater, you may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. I have spent, endless amounts of play points and tickets trying to make this work in Pioneer, and we've had to do it with like really bad 3-drops before, like Shakedown Heavy and Rotting Regisaur. And what's really nice about the Ancient One is it just curves so perfectly. You don't need your elf to survive. You just go turn 2 Ancient One, turn 3 Fight Rigging, hit an Ulamog, your opponent's dead. So I really, really do think that this might be the card that maybe finally makes this deck playable. What do you guys think?
I hope not.
I have no idea. When you said Fight Rigging, I was like, yeah, I kind of remember that card. So this is it. This is the card that's going to turn this into something?
Maybe.
Simic Fight Rigging. Why not? Yeah, like
it's got to be Sultai.
That's what I'm sorry. Yeah. I meant Sultai. Yes. Fight Rigging was like one of those blights on my arena experience. Like after Fight Rigging came out, it was like a pretty popular. I don't know if it was like I mean, it must have been Explorer. So like some kind of fight rigging deck, and I would just like face up against it all the time. And I feel like they always had it. And I was just like, this is not what I want to be doing with my play experience. But on their end, I'm sure they were like, this is exactly what I want to be doing with my play experience.
So what else is in this deck that you've tried in the past, Devon? So it goes into Ulamog, like that's what we're looking for, and is it Atraxa too, or like what else is in there?
Yeah, Ulamog Atraxa. The other one that I played a lot was Valky, because the nice thing about Valky is you can just kind of play it on curve as like a 2-drop if you don't have the fight rigging. Just play it as a 2-mana 2/1 and get some information on their hand. But yeah, Valky, Ulamog, Atraxa are kind of the three big ones. And then past that, it's just protection for the combo. So you have Thoughtseize, Fatal Push. You're, essentially a black-green deck. You get to play the good black interaction. It was playing elves, and then before it was playing, the other 3-mana big creatures, again, Rotting Regisaur and Shakedown Heavy. But yeah, so the nice thing about Souls compared to the other 3-drops is before the kind of the nut draw involved, you had to go elf and then play either one of your 3-drops or fight rigging on turn 2, have your elf survive in that case, and then play the other one on turn 3. But now, even if your elf dies, you could just say go turn 1 Thoughtseize, turn 2 Ancient One, and then turn 3 play the rigging, and then just immediately go from there.
Right.
Now it's a little awkward because they can still Fatal Push your Ancient One because it is a 2-drop, so it's not like you're free from Fatal Push. You are still a little weak to that, but Thoughtseize can help clear that up. But yeah, I don't know. I just love fight rigging. I've always been in love with that card, and I'm pretty excited to try this one out.
I mean, it feels like it fits right into what you're talking about, though. Like, I can't see any, who knows if the deck is actually going to fit in the meta and if it's going to be the right thing, but I can't see too much downside with putting this card in there to try to close that gap. Like, you can probably even get to a point where you get deeper into the game where you can attack with this at some point, right? Like, I mean, I know you're trying to combo people off, but maybe you get up to 8 permanents, through some alternate game plan, people killing your elves and other things like that. I don't know.
Yeah, and if you're playing the Ulamogs and stuff, you can just get rid of the Ulamogs from your hand to mill 10. You can do that too.
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly.
The 4-mana ability.
Yeah, it's got to be mill. That ability most people are probably going to be using to mill themselves. I'm sure. Like, I mean, I think people are going to be like, yes, I can do whatever, mill my opponents and kill them. But that's not what this is for. This is to try to turn your Ancient One on for sure.
You can discard your Emrakul, mill yourself for 15, and then resolve the Emrakul trigger after the mill.
Love it. It only takes 4 mana, an Emrakul, and an Ancient One in Modern.
I never want to see this card ever.
Could happen.
Don't watch my stream then.
Devon, what else is piquing your interest so far?
Let's do Souls of the Lost. So this one had a lot of buzz on Twitter. I don't know if you guys saw. A lot of people were talking about this one, but it's black and a colorless. It's creature spirit. It's a star, and then star +1 is the toughness.
Sounds
and
familiar.
Then it says, Tarmogoyf feature heart out. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card or sacrifice a permanent, and then its power is equal to the number of permanent cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. This card's sick. There's so many things that it enables, like, the kind of the level 1 that I saw a lot of people talking about was turn 1 Stitcher Supplier, and then turn 2 you just sack this and you fill your graveyard up for at least 7 cards.
Right.
But yeah, God, this card's so sick.
Right. So you can reasonably get to, let's say, probably a 4 or 5 on turn 2, right? Like sometimes you'll roll good and you'll get something more than that. I guess it depends on what your deck is made up of. It could just be all permanents, I guess, if you're not playing a lot of spells. So you can make a big attacker on turn 2. The one thing that I thought was interesting that I saw Maria and another person in our chat talking about was using Souls of the Lost to enable Vengevine in Modern, as in the same way that you can do it with Insolent Neonate, so that you can actually make it so that the discard, like if you manage to cast a 1-mana creature and then a Souls of the Lost, discard the Vengevine to it, you can bring back the Vengevine with that trigger still, because at any rate, there's a way to sequence it so that you can just use that trigger to bring Vengevine back immediately and attack with it right away.
Huh.
Hadron Crab.
I like that.
Hadron Crab, I think, was the card that actually someone said the 1-drop that they were using. So imagining Crab Vine as using Souls of the Lost as a way to have this be a big body and also just another way to fuel discarding from your hand in a way that makes sense.
I mean, I love this evil, like, bunny corn thing. This is great. It's like it is
an evil bunny corn.
Yeah.
Shane, what do you want it to be named?
Well, so I know the art does not feature this, but I feel like the description, it should be like a creature skeleton. It'd be like just swole skeleton or something like that. Because like it feels like a skeleton card to me. You know what I mean? Like playing with the graveyard, that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to call this swole skeleton, and no one's going to know what I'm talking about.
I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm going to let it pass since today is the day before Halloween, and
Thank
you
you.
can talk about
Skeleton
skeletons
at the gym.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting swole, babe.
Yeah, I want this to be called David S. Pumpkins. Like, what are you talking about?
Any questions?
So this card we think actually good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the other spot that I think it's really good in, or potentially good in, as is Greasefang. So Greasefang is really kind of lacking on ways to get Parhelion out of its hand. Right now, the only card that it really plays is Rafine's Informant.
Mm-hmm.
So not only is this, a 2-mana discard outlet to discard Parhelion that curves nicely into Greasefang, but it's also just like an additional threat. If they're answering your Greasefangs, you just have this big doofus on the battlefield. So I could maybe see it potentially being good in Greasefang too.
And that's a deck with a lot of permanents and not a lot of spells either, right? Like yeah. So that's something where this could get huge. Okay. There you go. Greasefang.
Sweet.
All right. I would like to talk quickly about one card, because I think we need to talk about it, even though I don't totally understand how it works. And I don't think any of us are Titan people. Am I right about this?
Oh, no.
We're not Primeval Titan people.
I know where you're going.
But I do think we need to talk about the card Spelunking, which is 2 generic and a green.
Spelunking?
Is it Spelunking or Spelunking?
I've always heard it or said it as Spelunking.
Spelunking in the same way that I called it Arbor, Frazier.
Arboreal Grazer.
Arboreal Grazer, and people went wild in the comments. All right, so Spelunking, 2 generic and a green for an enchantment. When Spelunking enters the battlefield, draw a card. Hey, that sounds familiar. Then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you put a cave into the battlefield this way, you gain 4 life. This will never be triggered ever in any of the games that we care about. What's that?
So it's Uro.
It's Uro, right? It's Uro at home. 3 mana Uro. And then it says, lands you control enter the battlefield untapped.
Okay.
And I would like to know, Dom Harvey, of all people, on Twitter has said that he believes this is going to be a player in Titan in some form or another, in Primeval Titan. And I don't know a lot about this, but it feels like we should recognize and maybe clarify and move on. I guess that what this is an additional copy of Amulet that lets you choose if you would like things to come into play tapped or untapped, depending on how you stack the triggers on the cards. Like, I think this is essentially a 3 mana value Amulet / Explorer is what this is.
Okay. Still costs 3 mana.
Yeah, it's weird. So I think the way that it works, as far as to my knowledge, and what I've kind of been told in chat, we all know that, Twitch chat is right about everything.
Right.
So what I've been told is that it's a replacement effect when it comes to the bounce lands, because the bounce land says enters the battlefield tapped, and this says lands enter the battlefield untapped. And to my knowledge, I think what you can do with replacement effects is choose which one you would want to apply. So if it's the instance where you have, say, a Spelunking and an Amulet, you would, if you have 2 amulets, you would prefer your lands enter the battlefield tapped. So you would choose for them to enter the battlefield tapped as opposed to untapped. Now, I don't know if that's 100% how it works, but that's what I was told, and it kind of made sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, so what this just becomes is sort of redundant copies of Amulet, even that kind of save you if you haven't gotten real Amulet online. So if you can have a board state that is a single Amulet and one of these, you can do some extra stuff as well. It's when you have 2 amulets that Spelunking becomes something you do not on its face want to have around. But at that point, you can draw a card and play an extra card. And so it does give you that trigger. It does give you the Explorer as well. But I actually think we should stop there, so that we don't get ourselves into any more trouble with
we don't
any
get the hot
Amulet
water
people.
with the Amulet fans.
I just want to give an old tip of the hat, a tip of the Boros Garrison to the Amulet crew.
If we start saying wrong things about Amulet, we might get demonetized. So.
Exactly. People might buy mean URLs about us. A card I would rather talk about from here is Restless Vents.
Ooh. Okay.
So I have been watching the recent new creature lands. I haven't really felt like any of them were too great. I know we talked about Restless Bivouac with Woe and all that kind of stuff. These ones haven't been too interesting so far, but this red-black one I think is pretty good. So let me read it real quick. It enters the battlefield tapped. If you play it with Spelunking, it won't do that. It taps for red or black, and it has an activated ability that's a generic, a red and a black, and says, until end of turn, Restless Vents becomes a 2/3 black and red insect creature with menace, and whenever Restless Vents attacks, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card.
Yeah.
Love it.
Seems good.
Excellent card.
I mean,
yeah, I think the Rakdos decks in Pioneer will just absolutely adore at least one copy of this card. You don't want to play a ton because it's ETB tapped, but just a shoe into those Rakdos decks, I think.
Yeah, it's a funny thing to look at this and go, wow, we have better creature lands still because we have ones that come into play untapped in certain conditions. But that second trigger is really kind of eye-opening, especially for these mid-rangey decks that actually don't have they have Fable, but they don't have a ton of other ways to kind of continue to have velocity through their decks if they run out of gas. And so having a land that gives you a little bit of that for basically no extra cost just seems very, very good. I don't think there's any shot that, of course, this gets any play in Modern, but,
Probably not. It's crazy how long we've been beating the drum on the AFR lands.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's insane to me how just every single, and those you play in multiple different formats too. Just a really, really, really awesome cycle of cards.
Yeah, gonna be tough to beat. It's gonna be tough to beat until they make another one that comes into play. If you have less than two, it comes into play untapped unless you have two other lands or whatever. But I think this card's very good. I think it's gonna be the best one out of this cycle as far as the formats that we care about go.
Yeah, I like it. It works with that 2-mana red thing that wants you to discard cards, so just play it there. Yeah. And I do think the Azorius bird one is pretty good. I think this one's probably better. I don't know where the Azorius one goes, but I think it's fine.
Isn't that just a 4/4?
The bird?
Yeah, what is it?
No, it's only a 2/3, but I think it's only 3 mana to activate.
Oh, okay.
So, but it flies.
Then you get a map when it attacks.
Yes, you get a map. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not bad. I have a card that I kind of like, but I also kind of don't like. It's Enterprising Scallywag, 1 under red for a 2/2 goblin pirate creature. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, create a treasured token. That's it. But this is some decent ramp for a goblin deck. I don't think this is a modern goblins card. I think Pioneer might have a little bit of a harder time descending because there's no fetches, but there is Skirk Prospector. But I don't know if Goblins needs the mana like this. It just seems like an interesting card that's easy to enable, but I don't know if the payoff is particularly amazing. I don't know. I guess if Snoop could use this, if that's revealed, but I don't really know. I just think it's an interesting card. I just think it's neat.
It is kind of cool. You definitely mentioned Pioneer is kind of where you would want to play this card, but with the lack of fetch lands, it is kind of difficult. I really wish that when I read this card, I really wish that it would just trigger whenever a permanent, whenever just descend, whenever a permanent leaves the battlefield, make a treasure, and then have it only count once each turn. But basically, if you got the treasure up front as opposed to end phase, I think this would be a lot better.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely. I'm trying to think of the Pioneer version. How many sack outlets? I guess they have Fanatical Firebrand, Skirk Prospector. So
that's really about it.
Maybe
when I was looking through lists.
Maybe the Pioneer deck. Maybe the Pioneer deck could want it because it's trying to ramp to some Den of the Bugbear and stuff. So I could see maybe being playing Pioneer.
Yeah, it's just a card I wanted to point out. I think it's interesting. I think Goblins people will probably test it, but that's just one of those decks that has so much density of creature types. It's like goblin creatures. It's just well, what the heck? How do you make room? What is that to be better than? And right now, I think it's pretty streamlined to have what it needs most of the time. Those aggressive goblins decks are better than you think. They're more popular than you think. I looked on MTG decks, I believe, just to see what people were doing with goblins of Pioneer, and I was like, wow, these are doing fine, and they're there's decks up to yesterday on the list. I think especially in East Asia, I think I saw a lot of decks from tournaments over there. But they're doing things. So
yeah, it's a good deck. I actually played the Goblins deck on my stream on last Thursday, lost playing for a trophy, but it felt pretty powerful. Good deck.
Sweet.
I think any card that makes treasure over and over again is always something to keep an eye on.
Yeah,
anyway.
Mana's helpful.
For me, this feels a little bit more it's going to end up in the treasure matter EDH decks, but we'll see.
Yeah, I feel like
Not that I know much
it's
about that.
designed more for that, probably.
Yeah. All right. 2 quick cards left to talk about in this just good cards category. I am going to throw this one to you, Devon. Glimpse the Core.
Glimpse of the Core. All right, perfect. So this is green and a colorless
My favorite
sorcery.
Brian DeWan album.
Green and a
That's a
colorless
deep
sorcery.
That's really deep.
Deep cut. Choose one. Search your library for a basic forest card. Put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Or return target cave from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. I would imagine most of the time you're not going to be getting a cave back from the battlefield, but for astute listeners at home, this is the first 2 mana. I would say unconditional, but it does only get basic forest, so there is technically a condition on the card. But this is the first rampant growth we've had in standard in I don't even know how long.
I can't believe that's true. I can't believe it's true. Yeah.
The last one I can think of was the dinosaur one from original Ixalan, but you needed to reveal a dinosaur from your hand, so it's not even like you still had to have an extra card in your hand. So I don't exactly know what this enables yet in terms of Pioneer. That's kind of where my head goes with a lot of these cards. But this is the first 2 mana, search for a land card with no other conditions. So I don't know what that means.
When did we decide that rampant growth was too OP? That's what I'm curious about. I mean, I guess it is, but it's interesting.
Know.
Yeah. It was in M10. It looks like that was the last core set printing that it had.
I think Farseek was M12, but past that, I think there was nothing else.
Oh, Rampant Growth is in M12 too, by the way, looking at
Rampant
it.
Growth, okay.
Yeah, it just missed being in Pioneer, actually a little bit, a couple years, I guess. But yeah, that's interesting. So is this card just good enough to go in? Like what deck is going for this in Pioneer? I guess you said you didn't know where it really fit or what this enables. So it's not like it really enables Mono Green Devotion or something like that. It might be something else that wants to ramp using this.
Yeah, like you're not going to want to play this over something like Woeful Haven in Mono Green Devotion because you much prefer the actual Devotion pip on. Yeah, exactly. But there have been some decks that I've been trying to work on that involve like Dryad of the Elysian Grove and Scape Shift along with Dread Presence, and they were really missing that kind of like 2 mana ramp spell, so I could see decks like that. Maybe something with Omnath, because searching for a land is really powerful with Omnath, and we don't have fetch lands and Pioneers. So
is this that much better than Growth Spiral, or is this like something you play along with Growth Spiral because like you get the guaranteed land versus like Growth Spiral's like if you have a land or draw a land with it?
So if you're playing a deck, like if you're playing a dedicated ramp deck, you would much prefer this card to Growth Spiral because you cannot afford in those ramp decks to miss on having a land. And if you cast Growth Spiral and don't have a land, that it's too detrimental. So you would have to be an extremely dedicated land-based ramp strategy. So, I'm not 100% sure what that looks like, but it is some added consistency with like putting a bunch of lands onto the battlefield. The one card that kind of comes to mind with this that I'm thinking about, the more that I kind of analyze it, is the Eldrazi Soul Land that you need 7 lands in the battlefield to make it a Soul Land. You guys know what I'm talking about? It's Battle for Zendikar. I can't remember the name of it, but
yeah, it's like Temple of the Ancient Gods, or it's like a reprint of that thing, or
Shrine of the Forsaken Gods.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Yeah.
So it's tap for a colorless or tap add 2 if you have 7 or more lands. So just having actual lands in the battlefield is some sort of like mono green Eldrazi ramp. Maybe the theory is you can just go over the top of Mono Green Devotion with Ulamog.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to see how that shakes out, but maybe something like that.
Interesting. Cool. All right, the last card I wanted to talk about, and just these things don't really have a category, Helping Hand. This is Unearth, but white. So it's a single white sorcery, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, tapped. I don't know what this is for, but it's interesting that they finally printed this card. Unearth sometimes gets some play in Modern occasionally, but maybe that's because it is cycling, so it has a floor to go with it. But I don't know. It's just interesting that it exists to me, I guess.
Yeah, like when do you really use cards like this? Like they're really only for like combo-y style decks, right? Because you're not going to bring them in against like a removal heavy deck just to like 1-for-1 each other to death, I imagine. Like that's kind of a losing battle, I feel like, versus just trying to overrun them.
Yeah, I mean, the big one in Modern, or one that people like to play around with, I don't know if it was ever a big one, was Lightning Skelemental. Was like, oh, you can Lightning Skelemental, then it dies, then you unearth your Lightning Skelemental. You know, there were decks that were built around those 3 drops where it was like, I'm going to play with Skelemental, and I'm going to play with Seasoned Pyromancer, and then kind of go from there. And it's just kind of like, got a lot of targets in my deck, makes it good, and all of the things that it targets are kind of 2-for-1s. You know, but that was never a great thing. I don't know.
I mean, Monastery Mentor costs 3, but I mean, I don't know if that's ever going to be a thing, ever.
One thing that I heard brought up in Spike's channel was this card with Ranger Captain of Eos. So it's just like, you know, ETB 3/3. You can either sack it to make it so they can't play spells, or if they just kill it, then you just get it back for 1 mana. That could be pretty powerful.
Yeah, I've actually seen that even with Unearth at different points in time when people are playing Marty Shadow for a little bit, where it was like Captain and Hex Parasite and, you know, Shadow. So then all of your key pieces can be brought back with Unearth as well. I don't know.
Yeah, if you were playing some sort of like Heliod deck that can't afford to play black for Unearth, this could be something that you want access to.
Yeah, we'll see. It's just interesting that they printed this card and color shifted it after all this time.
Well, honestly, the best home that I thought about it for was Greasefang, and then I realized that you put Greasefang into play tapped, and that doesn't work out the way you want it to.
Yeah, that's not helpful.
Don't play this in Greasefang.
That's not helpful for you.
You want to talk about some bad Merfolk, Dave?
Yeah, let's move on to Merfolk.
Why do they have to be bad?
I think that this first card, a lot of people think it's not bad. I'm very curious about it. So we'll come back to the other 2 that are just creatures later. But this card, which I have from a translation right now, is called Tishana's Tidebinder. 2 generic and a blue for creature Merfolk wizard. It has flash, and it says when Tishana's Tidebinder enters the battlefield, counter target activated or triggered ability. If an ability from an artifact, creature, or planeswalker is countered this way, that permanent loses all its abilities as long as Tishana's Tidebinder remains on the battlefield. I am a 3/2.
It's a lot of words.
This is a lot of words. This is a stifle. This is like a Mystic Snake Stifle is what this is, but it blanks the card for the rest of the time that Tidebinder sits there.
Yeah.
It's like split card of Stifle and O-Ring, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's a cool design.
I think this is a really interesting card, and I think, you know, a lot of people are excited about this for Modern. You know, lots of Merfolk people. I saw Nikachu talking about it on Twitter. We had a nice thread about all the different stuff that you could target. It's a lot of different stuff. You know, it's like you can target the Ring's fog ability and counter it and make Ring not work the entire time that Tidebinder's in play.
Oh, that's sick. I didn't even think about that.
I mean, there's other stuff like this. You can target Leyline Binding with this. You can target the triggered ability of Sigarda's Aid to make it not work anymore when this comes into play. No.
Modular and Arcbound Ravager?
Hang on, one second. You can do it with Arcbound Ravager for sure. So Sigarda's Aid can't do it. You can't target Sigarda's Aid, but you can stifle Colossus Hammer equipping to something with this, because it's an artifact. You can't target an enchantment with this. But at any rate, this is one of those cards that when you look at it, there's lots and lots of little pieces that I feel like it's interesting and tricksy enough that it might actually get some work done.
I mean, it still is a 3-mana Merfolk wizard. That's a 3/2.
With flash.
That's what I'm saying. Is like,
yeah.
So like this is probably viable in Merfolk, like, because who else is leaving like mana up for this type of play? I think, right? Like, I don't really think this probably is going to see a lot of play elsewhere, but I think it's a cool option for the fish.
Yeah, I was thinking about, I mean, probably not Murktide, right? There's almost no way as like a sideboard card against Ring or heavy Planeswalker decks. I don't know, but that deck does hold up its mana a lot, so I could maybe see something like that.
What about like Prowess? Where I'm like holding open mana.
Oh, it's Seek the Beast?
Yeah, I'm thinking, I guess I'm thinking of that build of Merfolk, which, I mean, essentially the Seek the Beast stuff is Merfolk. Like, this could pair with that kind of questing druid thing as well to tempo people out. Another thing that Nikachu pointed out that, you know, it counters the comes into play ability of Evoke Elementals and then blanks them the rest of the time that they're sitting there. So yeah, it's still a creature, but they might have just pitched 2 things or whatever to make it like there's all kinds of stuff with this card.
It does. It's got a lot of text on it. The one thing that I'm curious, and I don't know maybe how Merfolk decks are built these days. I'm wondering how many 3-drops they play, or like which ones they would want to cut for this. I'd have to look at a deck list, but
Yeah.
you can't play too many 3-mana cards. But I mean, in your Aether Vial deck, it's like another really flexible tool that you get to hold up with Aether Vial, and you just get a lot of utility out of it. It reads powerful to me for sure.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. I mean, I just wonder. I'm sure the Merfolk folks are going to try this out. I just wonder if there's a possibility that other decks pick it up, like you said as well. Other decks, like maybe it is Murktide or a version of Murktide that's more instant enabled or something like that. I don't know, but
Possibly.
I mean, maybe you're blinking this with something, so you bring it in, and then when they try to kill it, you ephemerate it, bring it back, get rid of a different thing. I don't know. All kinds
You're
of
saying
funny
is
things.
Soul Herder.
I am kind
Or
of saying Soul Herder, yeah. Where's Spike? We'll have to ask Everett about Soul Herder builds. I know. But...
I know, right?
Okay, outside of a card like this, one
we got next?
thing that people have been talking about in Merfolk for forever is, can we have some 1-mana 2/2s, please? And now we kind of have 2 of them with the card Cenote Scout, which is a single green for a creature Merfolk Scout that when it enters the battlefield, it explores, and it's a 1/1. So there's the one from original Ixalan.
Kumena's Speaker.
Right. And now there's this one. And I think that's cool, but I don't think that, like, this is not what modern Merfolk is really about anymore, in my opinion. Like, modern Merfolk is a pretty reasonably tightly constructed, like, tempo deck, right? That uses blue cards as much as it can, and then uses lords, and those lords stack up on top of each other, and that's it. But there's not really room in there for a 1-mana vanilla attacker.
To my knowledge,
Yeah.
I'm actually, I don't know if I haven't looked at a recent list, but I was fairly convinced the last version of Merfolk I saw didn't even play 4 Lord of the Vidlanus and 4 Master. Okay, this list now does, but there have definitely been points in Modern where they don't play the full 8 Lords, and that kind of just goes to show you that that's not where we're at right now, because there's so many Furies going around. You can't just play all these 1-mana 2/2s that don't have abilities. You have to play stuff like Tideshaper to mess with their mana, Trickster to have, Silvergill, every single one of these has ETBs for a reason, because otherwise you just get blasted by Fury.
Yeah. Tishana's Tidebinder, for example. Anyway.
Yeah.
But so it did make me wonder a little bit, okay, in a different world now, all of those cards are Pioneer legal as well. The green ones are. And the mana's worse, but we also have Cavernous Souls in Pioneer now as well. Are we going like Simic Merfolk in Pioneer, and is that a thing?
Well, Dave, I'm glad that you asked, because I actually have I love the fact that they're pushing Merfolk in the set, because I have been working on a Merfolk deck in Pioneer for quite some time, because you do get to play 8 Lords in Pioneer, because you have Merfolk Mistbinder and you have the 2-mana 1/1 flash one. I can't remember the name of it, Hexcatcher. So you get to play 8 Lords, you get to play all these, and what the deck was missing before was another 1-drop, because we were playing 4 Kumena's Speaker. We had to play some really bad ones, and I think this card is just about perfect for that Pioneer deck, and I will be at Cavernous Souls too. I'll definitely be playing a lot of that in Pioneer.
Yeah, and we're just beating down with, like, is this just a creature beatdown deck? Like, it's not as tempo-y as the modern one can be, even though it shares some of the same cards, right?
Think of it as a 2-color humans deck.
Yeah, more like that kind of vibe.
Yeah, but it gets to play Coco, so it's like there's definitely some trade-offs.
Yeah, yep. All right, so Cenote Scout fits directly in wherever you want to do with your Merfolk. Go for it, I guess. But probably not in Modern, since the Modern one's about something different. The last card I was going to talk about was Nicanzil, Current Conductor, which is green-blue for a 2/3 Merfolk Scout. It's an Explore payoff. I think this card reads as powerful, but I think it reads limited powerful, actually. I don't think there's...
Busted and limited.
I just don't think that anybody's going to be playing decks with enough Explore triggers in them to make these things, to make this happen. You know what I mean? And, like, that's too bad. Explore's an interesting mechanic, but it's just not foundational enough across enough sets for a card that pays you off so hard for exploring to do it. So, use this signpost uncommon well, but it's probably not going to be a thing in Pioneer even.
I agree.
All right.
I wish.
Yeah.
But
all right. So we're getting pretty deep on this right now. Anything in particular jump out to the two of you that you want to talk about now that we're off the Merfolk chats?
I mean, I think there's some really interesting like combo-y pieces, right? Like, I mean, I really want to talk about the Millennium Calendar, which is still 1 mana legendary artifact that reads, whenever you untap one or more permanents during your untap step, put that many time counters on the Millennium Calendar. You can also pay 2 and tap it to double the number of time counters on the Millennium Calendar when there are 1,000 or more time counters on the Millennium Calendar. Sacrifice it, and each opponent loses 1,000 life. So I just like the idea of someone having 1,000 beads from like their 1995 era Magic the Gathering deck. But I mean, this can kill people, right? Like this is, even though it's 1,000, it's like ridiculous. Like not only are there combos that kind of are just written on the tin more or less. Like we've got OLV1, which is 3 red, when enchantment, whenever you put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, all will be 1 deals that much damage to target opponent, creature an opponent controls, or planeswalker an opponent controls. So what, you can just like untap permanents and hit your opponent a lot? Like it's not an instant kill like thing, unfortunately, but
It's not an instant kill. It just consistently takes advantage of the counters and makes it go faster than the counters that than getting to 1,000.
I'm sure there are some very clumsy multi-card combos that could like make 2 mana and untap the Millennium Calendar. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what those are off the top of my head, and I'm sure they're probably at least 3 cards or something like that. But that is just the funny stuff I can see happening. But this is a control finisher. I mean, I don't think it's going to do it. I don't have the math on how long it takes even to do it. Do you have some math, Dave?
Oh, how long it takes to do it? It's 9 turns.
And that's starting from what? From turn 1? And you hitting your land drops or something like that?
It's 9 total, hitting your land drops, activating it every turn, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could have more permanents, though.
If you don't play it on turn 1, you can have more permanents later and then get more stuff. But yeah.
I don't think this is probably anything. I just think it's really funny.
I mean, here's the weirdest thing about this. This is a saga target. In Modern, you can tutor this up with Urza Saga. If you figure out some way to unlock it, you can also play land tutors in your deck to get it if you really need it. But I don't know what the answer is there. I'm just making an observation.
You lost me.
So
you were in it before I said it was a saga target?
No, I've been out for like the last 2 minutes.
Here's something I thought was interesting, though, okay? So whenever you untap something during your untap step, okay? Let's say you have something that is just like a really easy sort of tap-untap combo. Like you don't have to do anything with the tapping, untapping. If you can do that at instant speed, not during your main phase, like during your untap step, you just like start flickering like your 2 permanents you have that are just like tapping and untapping each other. You could just put unlimited amount of counters on your Millennium Calendar and win.
I don't think that works for what it's worth.
Why not?
No, it actually does.
Does
the
it?
way it's worded, it says when you untap 1 or more permanents
during your untap
step. And your untap step, you do get priority.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the way that it's worded, it would work like that. Now, maybe there's like a translation thing. I don't know if this is an English card or what, but it actually would work if you have like a thing that says untap target permanent, and you have like Fate Stitcher, for example. If you have 2 Fate Stitchers, you just go boop, 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 boop. And again, the way it's worded, that would work.
I could be wrong, but I thought about it when I read it.
And you can saga Millennium Calendar up to go with your Fate Stitchers, since that's a Modern card and not a Pioneer card.
Well, it works with Kiora's Follower, which is the Pioneer version of Fate Stitcher.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good for content. There you go. I didn't realize it. I didn't even think about that.
Cool, interesting
man, I'm
card.
a brewer now. Get me on Faithless. What else do we have in this section? Market Gnome, I think, is good. You highlighted that, Dave. I think it's just a good card. Market Gnome. I mean, I'm surprised it's in the combo thing. I think it's just a good value card, right?
So Market Gnome is a single white for a 0/3 artifact creature gnome that says when Market Gnome dies, you gain 1 life and draw a card. When Market Gnome is exiled from the battlefield while you're activating craft ability, you gain 1 life and draw a card. I mean, I don't know if this is really powerful enough to be a value card anywhere, really. Not really, but I do think that if you are crashing artifacts, sacrificing artifacts. A lot of people talked about this in Oswald Fiddlebender, for example. I don't know if that's a real deck or not, or could be a real deck, but this is a pretty good piece of sacrifice fodder if it draws you a card every time. If you could figure out a way to loop them or make them part of the beginning of a chain, or it can help give you some velocity and that kind of thing. But I do think it's the best gnome since Bottle Gnomes, for what it's worth.
True.
Yeah.
Very, very true.
Right?
Well, did we count Mutavault? Because Mutavault was a gnome after Bottle Gnomes.
But Mutavault was Mutavault's the best everything if we do that, right?
Best Merfolk, too.
Yeah, it probably is.
It is kind of nice. The thing is, like, this is just an 0/3 for 1 mana, so it does block pretty well,
for sure.
while also providing, good sacrifice fodder down the road. So, I mean, if there's a type of deck that wants, if they're like a white sacrifice deck, I definitely could see this being a player.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen people play somewhat worse, like sideboard cards that are just like gain life and draw a card. Like, like Filigree Familiar, I've like see play, and I'm like, really? We're playing Filigree Familiar out here? But I guess so.
Yeah. All right.
Get a block.
A different combo card that people have been throwing around. Amalia, Benavides, Aguirre, which is a 2/2 Vampire Scout for a white and a black. It has Ward, pay 3 life. Whenever you gain life, Amalia explores, then destroy all other creatures if power is exactly 20. That's the whole text on the card.
This combo arguably broke Twitter for 8 hours or whatever.
Could go longer,
when
please?
Todd tweeted about it.
Exactly. This is an infinite combo piece for Pioneer, and it only takes a Wild Growth Walker to go with it, and then it just goes off, basically.
That's a combo.
So it kind of only takes 2 cards, but theoretically, you need another piece to start the chain. You either have to gain some amount of life or trigger Explore, because the 2 cards just by themselves do not chain each other.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
okay.
so you need something to actually start the ball rolling, and that's you would not believe the amount of questions that I got in chat as to the day that I was streaming after Todd posted that, because I was playing Pioneer that day too, and everybody was just coming into chat like, "Is this that good? Is this that good? Is this that good?" The answer is, I don't know. Maybe. The fact that what I really like about the combo is you can hit both pieces off Coco.
Right.
That's really
that
sick.
Makes sense.
So if you can find if you can find some sort of Abzan company deck that wants to sack stuff and explore and gain life, like this thing, Zulaport Cutthroat starts the chain. So I've been playing some green black Tyvar sack deck that something that could start the chain. I could see it. I'll definitely play with it because it does seem like, and even the card itself, 2 mana 2/2 Ward, pay 3 life. That's not that bad stats.
Right. Fragile.
But I like it.
Interesting.
I like the next one. Bartolome del Presidio, a 2/1 white-black legendary vampire knight. Has some of my favorite text. Sacrifice another creature or artifact, no mana payments, no tapping. Put a 1/1
Delicious.
Put a 1/1 counter on Bartolome del Presidio.
I think it's Presidio.
Yes, thank you.
Presidio.
Okay, so I don't know what piece of this is a combo. I just know that this card is good because you don't have to pay to sacrifice. And I'm not sure where it goes or how it lives or what it means, but this is just a good card,
Yeah,
right?
it's a 2 mana sacrificer. People were playing Woe Strider for 3 mana because it just sacrificed, although they did come with the goat token. But this gets really big too. But Devon, I feel like you have ideas here.
Oh, I definitely do. So there is a white-black deck that I posted on Twitter about, I think it was a month ago when I 5-0'd with it. I don't know if you guys saw it, but it was right around when Soul Cauldron came out, and it was utilizing the backup mechanics. So you had there was a white-black deck, so you played the Enduring Bond Warden, which is a 0/1 that has backup 1, and when it dies, you move its counters on something, and then the black one, which was Scornblade Berserker. So it's an 0/1 backup, and then you could pay 1 to sack it to draw a card. So you have all this backup stuff with counters. Those cards both happen to be human, so you combine that with Thalia's Lieutenant to put a ton of counters, and then you have other humans that move counters when they die, and then you also have Soul Cauldron, which works incredibly well because all of your stuff has +1/+1 counters, so you can exile Priest of Forgotten Gods, and you just have 5 priests in play now because everything has counters on it. You play the Ozolith in combination with the Sack Outlets because you can just sack all of your stuff with counters on it, dump them on the Ozolith. The kill condition previously was Cartel Aristocrat, which is white-black 2/2, sack a creature, gave it protection from a color of your choice, so you just sack your board, combination with Ozolith, one-shot them. But Bartolome is like actually perfect for the deck because it's white black. Especially with Soul Cauldron, it's so perfect because it gets counters in itself. So if you have a Cauldron in play with something underneath a Cauldron, you're good to go. You just have all the other abilities. And then it's like it's when you have Cauldron with this card underneath it, it turns all of your stuff that already has counters into just free sack outlets. This card is this might be my favorite card in the set.
Wow.
I love it. It's so good. But yeah, specifically with Cauldron, it's like it's just absurd with Cauldron.
Yeah, it's this type of thing where you feel like it's going to feel similar to the first time you play with Walking Ballista under a Cauldron, right? Where you're kind of like, wow, I can just do everything. I can do anything because of this ability that's been added to my creatures that have counters. So
yeah, it's like no matter how they block, they're dead.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah, the counters are big game here. Like, I think it's costed well. The fact that it's not just like a scry, like Woe Strider. Like, there's a lot of weird counter synergies in these colors, especially. I think this is just going to do some really cool stuff.
Love it. I'm going to play a lot of this card.
Can't wait to see it.
All right. Well, I have one last card. Does anybody else have anything else they want to talk about? I want to talk about the last card that was dropped in. Yes. I want to talk about that.
Yeah, you're going to talk about that one?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, because I added this one in. I'll read it to you because I added this one in last minute, and we didn't. I think we didn't. I don't even think we had this card when we were doing the notes earlier. So this is Squirming Emergence. So it is black, green, colorless for a sorcery. It has Fathomless Descent, which is return to the battlefield. Target a non-land permanent card in your graveyard with mana value less than or equal to the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. So it's a reanimation of sorts, but you have to work for it. Now, one thing that's worth noting, it does not say target creature. It says non-land permanent. So if you have some sort of powerful planeswalker or artifact or enchantment, this returns Fable.
It returns the One Ring.
Sure does.
Oh,
yeah, like this card just, I don't know exactly where it goes, but 3 mana for a mostly, assuming you can fill your graveyard, unconditional return anything from your graveyard to the battlefield. This card has to be good somewhere.
Wow.
Fetch lands too. Fetch lands just fuel it. Like if you just go fetch, you are 3 permanents in the graveyard, you know? Yeah, I can see the wheels turning in Dave's and Shane's head right now.
I mean, I didn't even notice the non-land permanent part of this until when you mentioned it just now. I just assumed that we were going to be trying to find ways to bring Atraxa. Like everything to me is like, okay, that's not decks that I play. People are going to try to break Atraxa and bring it back with this or something. Maybe it'll be something else, but it does feel like when I look at this, I'm a little bit like, is there a way, like, do we play this instead of Persist or something like that in some decks? But Persist is so much faster, so maybe it's not that kind of thing. Like maybe this is really more pioneering, but I agree that just given that it's a mostly non-restricted reanimation spell and it only costs 3 mana, it's probably going to end up somewhere.
This is solid. I mean, the restrictions are not on the card type, which is important, right? Like it's not like a non-legendary, it's not a legendary, it costs a lot more. I mean, it costs 1 mana more than like a Persist, right? But of course you have to have filled your graveyard. We know that if you build your deck around that concept, that it's not going to be overly challenging. I think, yeah, there's definitely something here, right?
Yeah, one thing that I was thinking about with it, going back to what we talked about earlier with Souls of the Lost, where you go turn 1 Stitcher Supplier, turn 2 Soul Sack Supplier, you just get 6 looks at milling any sort of fatty. And if you build your deck in such a way where this is maybe Squirming Emergence is the only non-permanent card in your deck, and you just mill over at Atraxa, then there you go, good to go. That could be a turn 3 Atraxa. And you know, we're talking about Pioneer. I'm not 100% sure that this goes anywhere in Modern, because you do bring up a good point that Persist is quite a bit better, but it does have flexibility in the sense that it can, you know, return Ring, it can even return Leyline Binding. Like, there's just, you know, it seems really cool.
Yeah, totally agree. But wow, that was a lot of cards. 90 minutes. I think that we got through pretty much everything. We didn't get to talk about boats, but maybe we can leave these on the list and see if we still like them next week.
I don't know if I liked them this week, Dave.
Yeah, well, that's why I went ahead and skipped them as it pushed us to skip them. But I do think there's a lot of cool cards in this set, and I'll be curious to see what happens as far as how this molds Pioneer. If there's a breakout card here that ends up in Modern, I don't know if we've really hit on the one something that I really believe is going to make a big change in Modern quite yet. But I do think there's a lot of stuff that potentially could break into Pio. So
yeah, I mean, we haven't seen anything with Discover. like that really matters yet. I'm curious if they'll reveal some cards there. I like that this set is very build-aroundy. It feels like an Ixalan set. It feels like, sort of a, not necessarily just a creature type tribal. It feels like a mechanics tribal thing. You know what I mean? There's a bunch of dinosaurs we need to talk about because they're probably going to just be built around like for limited and maybe standard or something like that. But I think there's just a lot of options that we'll see or that people will try for their tribal deck or for their like sacrifice deck or their graveyard synergy deck or something like that. And that's what I think gets us cards that start breaking decks open a little bit more, make decks a little bit better, give people a little bit more cooler options. Like even if it does end up being a fight rigging deck, at least that's like a new option that people can mess with and have some fun with. And I think those are the types of game pieces that really make me more excited than, okay, the rate's just really good on this and the ETB is bonkers, so it's going to see play. You know what I mean?
Let the record show that Shane just used the words fight rigging and excited in the same sentence. So we can book that one.
He was talking about you, though. He wasn't talking about himself.
Yeah, I mean, I speak.
You're excited.
I speak for the trees here,
One thing I will mention before we close out the show, we didn't talk about a single card with Discover. And I think that is kind of intentional with how they designed the Discover cards. Yeah, it could either be, we haven't seen a lot of them, but I mean, to be completely, like, there's just no way they give us a 3-mana card with Discover 2. I just refuse to believe that's the thing that's going to happen. So, I mean, we'll let it play out over the next couple of weeks. We'll see what happens, but I would be shocked if we got that card.
I totally agree. I think we're all going to see all Discover 4 and Discover 3 and Discover 5, and that's going to be it.
Or like a 10-mana card with Discover X,
right,
or some stupid stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. This is a more fun spoiler episode than I feel like I often have, honestly, because like I think there's just some cool cards and some cool ideas. Great having you on, of course, Doom, because I think you think more about the Pioneer end of things than we do, and I think this is, again, it's a standard set. More for the Pioneer end of things, but we'll keep our eyes open for some modern options. But I think that wraps up the show this week. If you have not yet, feel free to subscribe to our podcast on your podcast player of choice. You get those latest episodes as soon as they drop on Thursday mornings. If you use Apple Podcasts or Spotify, feel free to go in there, leave us a star rating, leave us a review, a comment. We always have fun reading those throughout the week. If you want to reach out to us, you can do it on Twitter at the Dive Down, or email us at thedivedown@gmail.com. If you want to support us, which we appreciate, go to our Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown, or check out the store for some merch at thedivedown.com/store. Heavy Play, of course, our latest sponsor. Get those great deck and dice boxes and playmats with the Equip Mag system. Use code THEDIVEDOWN2023 for 10% off that first order. Mana Traders, of course, as well. A longtime affiliate of ours. Sign up for their service using promo code THEDIVEDOWN23 for 10% off of your first 2 months of running those Magic Online cards. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and rig some fights!